Hello, folks. We are now continuing. This is the second little session on the Catholic Church. And of course, we all can speak Greek, and we all know the Catholic means universal. So our ambition now is to talk about the universe, heaven and earth. That's the Catholic Church, heaven and earth. It's not just some pokey place in Rome or down the street. It's the whole of the universe. Okay, so here we go, boys. And girls. And the whole thing starts. The last session, we were talking about Adam and Eve. Well, the thing about Adam and Eve is, some people say it's lost in a mist of mythology and old ideas. But here we are entering history. We can, in a way, this name, for example, Abraham, why are we so involved? Why are we devoting ourselves completely to Abraham? I'll just do a quote if I can remember. I'm not very good even to quote about. If we look at Psalm number 2 in the Bible, it says, "You are my son." We've just remember that Abraham is me, and Abraham is not just 4,000 years ago. Everybody has to go through the same process. Now, according to the Bible and the Psalm number 2, it says, "You are my son. This day I have begotten you." Doesn't mean I've come from a kind of a womb. It means I have chosen you. "Ask me, and I will give you all the nations as your heritage." Ask me, God, and I can give you the whole world. Ask me, and the whole world and all the nations will be your possession. In other words, this Abraham story is basically telling us what everybody has to do. Everybody gets up in the morning and he looks around the place, whatever his situation. He may be a poor servant sweeping the street, or he may be a king, or he may be an emperor, or he may be a dictator, whatever it is. That's him. Abraham. Every man is Abraham. The word Abraham means a father of a great multitude, because if the father does his stuff, he will be the father of a great multitude. So we've got to follow this guy Abraham to solve all the world's problems, literally. Okay, well, we can see here in miniature, if we turn on the television anywhere in the world, what do we see? Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. That's what we see. And what's going on? It's chaos. Let's face it. Israel is surrounded by these old nations. We're not saying who is wrong or who is right. We're just saying categorically, which everybody knows, it's a farce. Up here we have Armenia. Armenia, where does Armenia comes from the Urartu tribes. They were originally up there, became Armenia. Okay, Iran, where does Iran, Persia come from? The Elamites. Okay, up here we've got the Kurds are all here. What do they come from? They come from the Medes. We know the Medes and the Persians. Here we have the Jews. Who do they come from? The Habiru. We all know there's a Habiru, and the kind of, so we have all these tribes coming down here. The Hittites, the Hurrians, and you have the Sumerians, and the Persians, the Parthians, and they all go up. And what are they coming to? They're coming down. This is where Abraham was. So Abraham came from this place called Ur, which is the center of the trouble. We can remember it just recently when Bush wanted to invade. That's where the army was. Here is Kuwait. So we're right in the middle of this whole caboodle. And they're all fighting. Today, the big fight is going on exactly as 5,000 years ago. The place was shambles. But out of the chaos came the Catholic Church. Now, this is the great thing about it. God revels in bringing order out of chaos. So the order of the world came here. The whole went. For example, today is Friday, 11:30. Friday, 11:30. The concepts of Friday, the fifth day, 11:30. All these numbers. Where do they come from? They come from here. The Sumer Akkadian civilization, like the Baghdad, this Mesopotamian civilization, even before Abraham was 4,000 years ago. If you go back 5,000 years ago, they already knew about 365 days in the year. They knew about, it's called the sexagesimal system, 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in an hour, 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in every minute. That all came from here. So Ur is, now let's just say, we'll just go a little bit faster here. We see, this is just chaos. But it was also the cradle of civilization. And we could more aptly call it the cauldron of civilization. In other words, from this chaos, all these threads, the Parthians, the Iranians, the Persians, the Egyptians, built what? The Catholic Church. That's why it was here. All these civilizations, all these ideas from the Caucasus Mountains, coming down here, the Sumerians, the Hittites, and all these people, they all went built. They were the threads building up the most magnificent tapestry in the world, which is the Catholic Church. And so we have here Ur. Abraham comes from here. He goes up to Haran, and he comes here, and he's the first. Okay, but this is going. And he comes here, and he says, "Okay, I'm following God's plan." And God's following plan can solve all these problems. Really? Really? Yes, really. Actually, all these problems, if we follow Abraham, we follow his ideas, which goes from Ur to Israel, old Israel, to Rome, to the Mass, to the Catholic Church, a very simple line, we've solved the problems of the universe. Really? Yes. Look at this. You see, this is chaos. Now what do we see? After 2,000 years, that's 1,000 more plus years ago, what happens? Look at that. Look at this map now. What happens? There we are, boys and girls. The whole thing becomes Catholic. The whole thing is under one guy, the Pope. The whole of the Western known world and the whole of the Eastern known world. You can say, this is Iraq. What is this? Catholic churches, bishops, meetings, synods, defining of the truth of the world. They were all out here, so they were transformed. These are the Phrygians, these are the Hittites, these are Alexander the Great, these are the Medes, these are the Persians. They all become Catholic. This is Iraq. Look at all this. Catholic churches. This is Iran, Catholic churches. This is Persia, Catholic church. All of these people, Persia, Iran, Iraq, Syria, they all listened to the Pope. And the Pope was the boss, and the whole thing was peace. Well, obviously, there were a certain amount of clashes going on. But at least it was one big system, one big order. And you break that order, you revert to what was going on before. So let's follow Abraham. Okay, what does he do? Okay? All right, so we're going back again to Iraq. We said this is Ur. As we've just said, this is the Persian Gulf. Now, what have we got in the Persian Gulf? We've just stated, this is the Persian Gulf. This is Ur here. Abraham was here 4,000 years ago. There was, what was this? This was called the Middle Bronze Age. 4,000 years, it was the Middle Bronze Age. Stonehenge was 4,000 years, the second part. The Minoan civilization in Crete, the Linear B writing was coming at this time. The Egyptian pyramids were being built at this time. So we can see that contemporary with Abraham, Stonehenge, the Minoan civilization, the Egyptian civilization, this was 4,000 years ago, 1,500 years before Buddha, before Plato, before Aristotle. God has his plan, and the plan came from Ur. And the Ur, if we'll notice in a minute, this place, Susa, there's a place called Susa here. How can we be so sure that we're not talking complete nonsense? Because thanks to the archaeologists, you see, Mari, Nutsu, Nineveh, Assur, Nippur, Uruk, Lagash, Lhasa, Dumati, the archaeologists have been at work in all these places, and they've come up with thousands of cuneiform tablets. You see, look, this is Ur. All right, now what happens in Ur here? Okay, well, that's the same thing. It's the same. You see, well, they have Ubayyad civilization, Lhasa, Lagash, and all these people are, as you said, building up the present. Now, it started off 5,000 years ago, Kish. The king of Kish, he said he had a mandate from heaven to get moving. this fellow, for example, the third dynasty of Ur, which was 4,000 years ago, the king Namu built these things for they're called ziggurats. We're going to see that in a minute. They built these ziggurats for their gods. So this is we kind of say the cauldron. This is the cradle of civilization. Uruk, Kish, Ur, Larsa, Lagash. We have here the stories of Gilgamesh come from Uruk and these places. And we have here Lagash. We've got tablets describing wonderful stories about how the king of Lagash, the river of Mesopotamia, the Tigris, wasn't doing its stuff. So he has a dream, and the king of Lagash is called Gudea. He says, "Oh, Queen, Lord of Heaven, what shall I do?" He has a vision. What should I do? Okay, the Lord King says what? What did he said? He said, get cracking. Okay, build. What? Build what? Okay? We're going to build something. Okay? This is going over into the Elamites, but this is build. What am I supposed to build? All right? I'll tell you what I'm supposed to build. He said, build. What are you supposed to build? Build a ziggurat. See, look. The word ziggurat is an Akkadian word which is used in Mesopotamia and Elam. Okay? Now, that's the word. That's the Tower of Babel. Where did the Tower of Babel come from? The Tower of Babel came from that. Because just as in the Middle Ages, the European people were going completely mad, building these huge, big cathedrals simultaneously, well, not simultaneous, but 4,000 years ago, the Elamites, the Mesopotamians, the original Proto-Iranians from the Elamites, this is Elam. This word Elam is turned into Persia. That's where the Persians came from. And the Akkadian words, the Akkadian is the Babylonians came from this area here in Mesopotamia. The god said to the king of Lagash, Gudea, build me a ziggurat. And he built a ziggurat. And at the top he has a silver level here. And he put the god here, and then in one of the most famous ones we say is in Ur, the famous which we've just said Abraham comes from. And you know, Ur is not just 4,000 years ago. For another, you could say the Ur civilization, the people there, you could say it's about 3,000. So it's well into 4,000 years ago, because when Abraham left Ur, there were all sorts of people, but the king Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus the Great, all these people went to Ur because of the god. You see, this ziggurat was dedicated to one of the most important Elamite gods in Shushan, both of whom had temples at the top. So all these gods. Now, why am I saying all these gods? Because all the whole of the world at the time had a king and a god and a church. That's what the whole thing was about. So this is all leading us to the Catholic Church. It's a ziggurat. Okay, now these are the ziggurats. Look at them. You see, it's pretty amazing. You know, after 4,000 years, you've got these fantastic relics of the ziggurats. This is the Tower of Babel. All right, here you see this. These. This is more or less. This is only about. It was about 100 feet high. Some of them went for 100 feet high, and at the moment, if we go to Persia, if we go to Mesopotamia, if we go to Ur, if we go to what was near Elam, we go to Persepolis, and we go to all these places, we will find at least 32 of these ziggurats. And look and see how beautifully they've been preserved. But we can just remind ourselves of one thing. Various things. We can remind about one thing, that as we look at this, just as when we go to the Europe, all places of Europe, we have these beautiful cathedrals, and we're very struck. We go in and we see the stained glass windows. But actually, if we went to Europe 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, more or less, and even before and after all these cathedrals were being built, we would have every, Chartres, Nîmes, all these cathedrals, they would be brilliant color. All the facade of the Notre Dame, they were painted every day. So all the people, whether they were the the tribe of the great unwashed would go. But all these people would go to these cathedrals and they would see on the face of these cathedrals the whole of the history of salvation. Likewise, 4,000 years ago, these ziggurats, they had, inside the ziggurat, they were these mud brick, this setup. But originally they were covered with beautifully coloured, scintillating tiles, showing the people at the time what their gods were all about. So this is where we've got so far. We've got to go Ilamat. We're going to see people yearning to make relations with God. This is how they did it. And they started off, and then they gradually morphed, changed, developed into what? The Roman Catholic Apostolic Church. So we're again, there we are. Okay, God bless, have a good time.